Hi, this is Ariel from France.
Bonjour.
Welcome to this channel where we make fun costumes and weird stuff. Today is definitely in the weird category. I will be making fantasy armor. I usually make pretty dresses, but I like everything related to costuming. And when I see many people making crazy cosplay armors, making those incredible 3D pieces that can be painted to look like anything and that can be worn as a costume, I just have to try those techniques. Plus, I had a friend making an armor from the video game Monster Hunter, and I am an adult and I can do whatever I want. And I want to play dress up with my friends as crazy monster warrior dancing ladies. The costume is this. Yes, it's weird, it's creepy, it's completely impractical, but I like it. So I'm going to make it. I made a previous video about making the boots. They are not painted, but at least they are constructed. And now I need to make the rest to have a wearable funky costume that I will be wearing on stage, dancing in front of an audience. Let's get to work!
Okay, a big piece we need to make first is the belt. I'm trying to decide on the proportions by wrapping myself into paper and drawing it with a pencil. Please enjoy my space dolphin pajamas. I will reduce the chunkiness of the belt slightly just to fit my proportions better. I'm using high density foam for this project. This is, let's call it the belt buckle. This is 2 layers of 1 cm foam that I glued together to make it thicker. I'm cutting the rough shape using a box cutter that needs to be very sharp. I'm using a sharpening stone very often. I also cut 2 strips to make the belt. As before, I'm using paper again to determine the size and the placement of those things. We'll call those the flaps. When I'm happy with the shape, I just trace them onto foam. This is 5 mm foam. I use my pattern to draw on the decorative shapes, because each flap will be made of 2 layers together, but with different shapes. The belt buckle will need to be rounded with the Dremel, so I'm cutting away quite a bit of foam. This will make a lot less material that I will have to sand. And also, it means less dust. I have cut all the pieces of the belt, and now it's time to sand. I am using a Dremel. This is a rotating tool, and the attachment bit is sandpaper. And with this tool I can carve all the texture into my foam. The foam is not a very strong material, so I have to be careful and carve slowly to make sure I don't make any big damages. But the texture is also organic, so it's okay if I mess it up a little bit. This makes a lot of noise and it puts dust particles everywhere. If you do that, make sure to wear a mask, because you really don't want all those little things inside your lungs. I'm using the vacuum cleaner every 10 minutes. This is just the first step of the texture, and now I need to make all the little details. They are very easy to make, again because it's just organic, so it doesn't have to be very precise. And it goes, I would say, pretty fast, but there are so many to do, and I spent probably a few hours on this. I should have counted, but I forgot. Sorry. This is my sewing hem that I just covered with a plastic bag to prevent staining it. I'm going to shape those foam pieces. The other super cool thing about the foam is that you can use heat to shape it, to melt it, and it's really easy to do. You heat it with a heat gun. Be careful and don't burn yourself. And then you just put it in the shape you want until it cools down. The heat will also smooth out the surface a little bit. I don't know if you can see it, but the sanding just left a very slight fuzzy texture, but this goes away with the heat. I have shaped my pieces and I'm gluing them together using contact cement. This is neoprene glue. You have to apply it on both the surfaces that you're going to glue together. Let the glue dry a little bit, and when it's not sticky anymore, you can press the 2 surfaces together and they will bond very strongly. And before putting them together, I am sandwiching a little piece of fabric between the 2. This I will use to attach this piece to the belt. It is strong enough, and also it will help keep a little bit of movement. Later on I will make little horns to go in the center of those circles. With those two pieces together, I just need to sand the edge to make it cleaner, and the piece is good to go. I just have to do that again 6 more times. The belt buckle of the costume has little lights inside, so I'm cutting off a piece of an acrylic ball and I'm sanding it on the inside to diffuse the light. I use it to cut a hole in the buckle, and I'm leaving a little recess on the 2 layers of the foam. This will allow me to glue the acrylic ball inside. For this, I will be using some very cheap fairy lights, and they are white. So I'm just putting a bit of green plastic, and that will change the color that we see on the outside. There is a little cage thingy on this plastic ball, so I marked it with a pen. I'm scratching the surface to help the glue stick on this. This is simply made with little pieces of 2mm foam. All around the belt part, there is those tiny bones. I don't have enough foam clay to sculpt them all. I'm making the base shape using 5mm foam. I made this flat-ish tunnel, and I added another tunnel on top of it. I'm sorry, but it's difficult to come out with some technical term on this project. You just have to go with the shapes. So now that I have made this, I just have to chop it into little pieces to make my little bones. I used some scrap foam to fill the little holes. And now I'm using foam clay to sculpt the right shapes and to make it look more like bones. Foam clay is a clay made of foam, surprenant, and it feels a bit like chewing gum, but it can be softened using water. And because it dries quickly, the water will give you more time, and you can smooth it out with your fingers. And it will stain your clothes. I was happy with these shapes. They kind of look like tiny bones, and they just need a little bit of texture like the rest of the foam. Next piece is the boob protection. For this, I'm draping the shapes with some scrap cotton that I have on my mannequin. I will have a support layer closer to my body and a decorative layer. The support layer, I am cutting it out of this black foam. This is a lower density foam, so it's not great for texture, but it is more flexible, and I think it will help me get in and out of the armor. I made a basic shape, tried it on, fixed the parts that were not great, and I could start adding all the decorative shapes. This metal thing, I'm searching for the shape in paper, so I can use that as the pattern, and cut it out of a higher density foam. Same step for the other parts. And this can be glued on the side. Now those chest things have a slight angle, so on the inside of the part I'm cutting a recess, and when I glue it shut, you can see the angle on the outside and you don't have to make it in 2 pieces. I like this technique a lot. There is a big piece on the back, and I'm making it 2 layers, using low and high density foam. As before with the belt, I'm using my Dremel to sand the texture in those pieces. This time I could use my sanding box, which is just an IKEA box where I cut 2 holes to put my hands in, and I added an acrylic sheet on the top to see better. I'm doing this inside my apartment, and this will greatly reduce the amount of dust and the amount of cleaning that I have to do. Highly recommend the sanding box. I apply contact cement and I can glue all the chest parts. And before I forget, I'm cutting off the shoulder where I will add the opening to get inside the armor. I made a mistake. I made the neckline a bit too wide like this. I really don't want to redo those pieces, so I'm going to add. That makes the neckline a bit more round. Mistakes happen. I added a collar made of 1 piece in the back and a bigger piece on the front, and the chest part was all constructed. Last step on the construction for now, I am making the shoulders. They are huge. I'm using a ball from IKEA to pattern the rough shapes with some painter's tape. I didn't really know what I was doing, just tried to make a big round shape. And the bigger shoulder was too small, so I cut it in half and I added a straight piece here just to make it wider. It fits. The shape is kind of messy, but again it's kind of organic, so I don't care. As long as I have the right proportions, I'm happy. I made a little border and it was ready to be sanded. I also improvised the shape of the smaller shoulder. And after sanding it, it was fine. So I traced where I wanted to add my little horns. Most of the horns are just little cones of foam. And the other smaller horns I just carved from scrap pieces of foam. Again, foam is so easy to carve with the blade, and it's really pleasant to do. That's a lot of horns. They look terrible now, but with a little bit of sanding, they will be cute. And now I'm just cutting the base of them a little bit, and I can glue them everywhere. Finally, all the construction is done for now. And now we can start on painting. I started to prime everything using Flex Bond. I added a bit of water to it to make the brush strokes a little bit less visible. And I did 2 layers. I kind of wished I would have done maybe 4 layers, but that's okay. I also added a bit of sand in my primer. This will add a little bit of texture in some places. I will mostly do the bone color, so I started with a base coat of this warm grey and applied 2 coats. This is close to bone color, so I'm using it everywhere. I need to finish this for this weekend. I then added the first layer of shading using this brown, and I'm applying it lightly, trying to make an ombre. Of course, this would have been so much faster with an airbrush. Oh well. I'm doing this in all the recesses and the base of the horns. The first layer is in. I'm going to add a darker brown, maybe black on those creases, and maybe a wash. And there are real bones on my table, nothing weird about that. I discovered that using a makeup brush worked 10 times better for this. I am shading again with a darker brown and then a bit of black. And the black and brown I also use on all the little creases to make them more visible. I don't want all the effort I put in the carving to disappear in the paint. I painted all the non-bone spots black. This will do for now. It looks clean and it is wearable. I will upgrade all the black parts in the future. I did that on all my pieces. And with the different shades of brown and black, I really think it looks natural. I am pretty happy with this. With all the pieces painted, I could assemble the belt. Putting everything together was the fastest and most satisfying part. I also made these 2 attachments to connect the shoulders and the chest. That way they can be separated and they will take a lot less space. The last step was to add a sole under the shoes. Currently they're just pieces of foam and they will get destroyed if I walk around in the concrete. So I borrowed the sole from an old pair of shoes and I glued that to the bottom of mine. I added screws because I don't fully trust this glue. This costume is not finished if you look at the reference, but it is finished for now. The main pieces are constructed and it was the most work. I think they look really cool, even separately. Even a bit fashionable in a weird way. It is pretty easy to put on and it weighs nothing. And that makes it really pleasant to wear, but also it's very fragile. This is a costume mostly for show. You can't really run around in the forest or fight monsters. But you can pretend. And now, let's dance!
I made a few views.